Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Today I really want to talk about a specific dragon. So this is a Dragon of Icespire Peak Dungeon Master Guide. That means if you are playing in this adventure, I wouldn't hang around. There are spoilers for anybody who's actually a player, but if you're a Dungeon Master, you're in the right place. So the topic is Cryovane. Cryovane, the white dragon. This is the main antagonist, the main villain in your adventure, and it's really the whole adventure, all the little side quests and quests, main quests, they all revolve around this one dragon. Now, when I was looking for research on Cryovane, I found my research notes were very much helped by the certain pages from the adventure. So the pages you want to actually look through in the adventure, Dragon of Icespire Peak, is page 7, page 11, page 30, 31, 33, and of course 64. This is where the monster stat block is. You can also find additional information if you're interested in opening another book, which I'm sure none of you will have too much of an issue with, and that is you can check out page 102 of the Monster Manual. And there are essentially a number of pages that talk very much about white dragons and how they operate. I found that really useful when I was researching Cryovane, and I feel like you'll find the same thing if you have a look through that resource as well. So Cryovane is a young white dragon, obviously not fully developed and therefore doesn't have quite the experience of an adult dragon or an ancient white dragon, but still a dragon as such, been around a long time. And I think a lot of people, when they start thinking young white dragon, they're thinking young stupid white dragon, or any dragon that's young is stupid. I am going to try to make it clear to you that that's not necessarily the case, and we'll go through that very shortly. Cryovane was driven south by more powerful dragons. Now, the more powerful dragons are in the north, and Cryovane has been driven south. So that means that more than likely, given that it's a white dragon, the dragons that are larger are residing in places like the Spine of the World, or Icewind Dale, or the Sea of Moving Ice. These are all sort of very Arctic locations, very cold locations, places that white dragons would normally hang out, certainly the large ones anyway. Cryovane currently has claimed the Sword Mountains, which are just below south from Phandalin. For those of you who are unaware, I'm going to show you a map very shortly, not right now, but I will show you fairly shortly the location exactly on the map. It says in the adventure that Cryovane is a dim-witted and cruel dragon. I would like to point out that Cryovane might be dim-witted and cruel, but he's not stupid. And if you have a look at the stat block for Cryovane, you'll see that his intelligence is 6. So he's not going to be casting spells. He's probably not going to be constructing highly complicated tactics or involved in some sort of convoluted dialogue with your players' characters. There's probably not going to be a monologue taking place. There's probably not necessarily going to be a lot of deception being put into place either. So you've got to understand, dim-witted does not mean stupid. And for those people who think, well, now I can trick Cryovane, my players could do a lot more trickery with Cryovane because he's dim-witted. That's more like Venom Fang. Venom Fang is much smarter and therefore will play those games. The chances are that somebody playing around with Cryovane starts engaging in some sort of conversation with this dragon isn't going to worry about anything other than breathing on them, freezing them solid, and biting their head off. That's the kind of thing that a white dragon would do. It really wouldn't hang about and wait. Currently, this dragon is hunting for food and treasure. White dragons are renowned for the fact that they just have to consume so much food and they always seem to be hungry. So I would imagine a lot of livestock such as cows and sheep, goats and so forth would be going missing during your adventure. You don't necessarily have to have the dragon eating people. As for treasure, Certainly the dragon would be looking for treasure. As I'm going to point out, he hasn't really found a lot of treasure. That should be not really an issue, because there is actually quite a lot of stuff he could hoard in his current location, but it hasn't taken place. Now this indicates that Cryovane has not been in his current lair for very long, and that's something I would like to point out. So a lot of my assumptions are based on that. So currently there have been white dragon sightings. They're becoming more common, so more of the locals have been seeing a white dragon flying. It might be from a distance, it might be up close, it doesn't really matter, but there are now reports of dragon attacks. So Cryovane has been attacking people or animals, and those reports have been being fed through to the Town Master, Harbin Wester, and probably Sildar Hallwinter as well, if you're using Sildar Hallwinter in your adventure. I currently am doing exactly that myself, although my players are going to sort of take on that role fairly shortly. So make sure to make it clear that that's the sort of stuff that is taking place. That's got to be the crux of your entire adventure, is making sure that the players know there are lots of sightings and there have been dragon attacks. Next, the crumbling fortress on the northeast spur of Icespire Peak is where the dragon lair is. There is a little bit of information on that fortress and its history. I'm not going to go into that. I feel like that's like a completely additional adventure. Not so much adventure, I mean another video as such. And could well, of course, be another adventure itself if you wanted to. But for intents and purposes, I want to keep this video on Cryovane rather than talking about the history of the fortress itself, because I don't think that's hugely useful at this present time anyway. So what we know is that the dragon has seized the fortress from a tribe of savage orcs, and they have lost their orc war chief. So in other words, the dragon has killed their orc war chief, probably frozen him solid, and then just bitten him in half and consumed him, which tends to be the going tactic for most white dragons anyway. There have been many other creatures that are being driven from the mountaintops that are migrating to the foothills and other locations around Phandalin, so you can incorporate orcs or other creatures if you wanted to, not just the ones that have been stated in the adventure. So there's a little bit of room for movement. I think that's quite fun in itself. That also means you could use something like a roc, which is a large bird, although I feel like a roc is probably more than a match for a young white dragon currently in your adventure. But maybe you could deal with, say, a more juvenile version of the large bird. Phandalin has not been directly attacked by Cryovain so far. The adventure doesn't say anything about Phandalin being directly attacked. So why would this be the case? I think it's pretty easy to understand what's going on here. Even Cryovain, being dim-witted but not stupid, would consider it risky. There are too many people with bows and arrows. There are too many people who would cause trouble. I think the dragon would probably stick to picking on things it can deal with fairly easily. And as I said, a wisdom of about, I think it's 11 is the wisdom for Cryovane, is average. It's actually probably slightly above average. So in other words, it's smarter than the smartest wild beast. That's essentially what you've got to understand with Cryovane. Might not be a legendary dragon or have the dragon tactics we're used to, but it's smarter than the smartest beast you could possibly run in your adventure, just because of the intelligence of 6 and the wisdom of 11. I think that's the going consensus as far as I was concerned. Okay, so a manticore has been driven from the Sword mountain tops. There's a nest up there where the manticore used to live, but this dragon has driven it away from there, gone down into the foothills, and winds up at Umbridge Hill Stone Windmill, which is, Umbridge Hill is one of the main adventures that you will have to run at some point, and there is going to be some sort of interesting things happen. This is sort of indicating the effect the dragon has on the rest of the environment and the locale. So I think that's really interesting. I don't think the manticore is one of those characters that you should consider a monster the players will meet once and disappear or be butchered like a dog, never to be seen again. Including the orcs, the orcs that are talked about in the adventure that the dragon has been messing with. They also show up in another adventure. They're actually first really encountered in the Dwarven Excavation adventure. But I recommend, as I've already said before, not presenting those orcs straight away, letting them scout out the location and waiting for the dwarves and the players' characters to leave before taking ownership of that temple in the Dwarven Excavation adventure. One of the things I was really concerned about is the encounter table. So where's the dragon? Where's the white dragon encounter table is risky for the players' characters. Essentially what you do is every time the players' characters go somewhere, you're going to roll a 20-sided dice, and that will determine the location of the dragon. The idea being that you can then foreshadow the dragon as much as possible, but not necessarily have the dragon attack the players' characters. In the adventure, it talks about if the players' characters don't sort of find some cover, then maybe it would come down and attack, or maybe it would attack some other creature or animal, or cause some sort of devastation to the location, or just be flying above. All of that's fine. I would recommend, yes, that sounds all right. I don't really like the idea of throwing the white dragon at players' characters too early on, because the likely outcome is devastation. If you really want to wipe the party out, that would be the way to do it. So I would recommend making sure the dragon is far enough out of shot. The adventure does talk about making sure it's out of range, so something like a longbow should not be able to target it. It's that far away, it gives them time to find some safety. But also too, if you roll on the table, the encounter table, and it's not anywhere near the player's characters, in other words, it's not the location where the players are moving, and you could wind up with the entire adventure them never actually seeing the dragon at a distance, because you just don't roll the right number when they travel from one location to the next. My advice to you is the advice that Sly Flourish has given, and that is, if the number you roll is a location that's pretty much close to where the player's characters are, but not that location, still have them see something flying high way in the distance. You don't have to spell out that it's a dragon. You can just say you can see sort of a light-coloured winged creature off in the distance. And you can even present it as being a seagull if you like. But that sort of helps foreshadow it. Otherwise, you won't ever have the players encounter this thing at all in any form whatsoever. And that would be a shame. So Cryovane doesn't fight to the death in the adventure. Apparently, that's what it says. Cryovane doesn't fight to the death unless at the Icespire hold. I have a big question around that and concerns. Why is it that we're talking about a dragon fighting to the death? Dragons don't usually perish that easily. It sounds like somebody is trying to set it up so that the players can feel powerful and dispose of the dragon fairly easily once they get to level 6, which is probably where you want to be presenting the dragon, which is the Icespire hold adventure, or location. It's not so much an adventure but a location. I don't like that idea at all. So this is what I'm going to suggest to you. Why does Cryovane ever fight to the death if he was fleeing or fled from larger dragons? Now, if it's going to flee from a larger dragon because it's more powerful and more dangerous, then if it comes across another creature or a group of creatures or the player's characters and it's getting its ass handed to it, would it not flee and come back another day to have another go at them? I think that is far more likely. So that's how I would play the dragon if I were you. Don't get fancy, don't get silly, try to keep it basic, but simply, dragons don't fight until they are absolutely destroyed. They know they can outlive these things. They can come back and pick them off at a later date. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, yes, but Cryovane is dim-witted. But he's not stupid, okay? We're looking at intelligence when you're thinking in terms of dim-witted. No, this dragon has still got average wisdom, and that's what we really need to focus on. Alright, I want to talk just briefly about some of the tactics as well. Don't have the dragon attack the party. And I already said this before, it's much more sensible until you're ready for the dragon to actually attack the party and they're at a point where they're capable of dealing with that. Make sure your dragon is attacking livestock or animals from a distance or close to the party, anything like that. But I wouldn't go directly for one of the characters simply because the dragon breath is enough to wipe them out. It can pick them up, fly off and drop them, and that would kill them pretty much. So don't do those sorts of things. I think you stick with non-player characters, your NPCs, and anything that you can sort of throw at them without destroying the party. Give them a chance to build up their resources and their power. So Cryovane prefers Arctic locations and areas, icy mountains, which is why it's currently residing where it is. But it hasn't been there for very long, and I think that's quite clear based on the movement of the orcs and the movement and what the Manticore is doing in the adventure as well. One of the things that is stated in the monster manual is that white dragons are primal and vengeful, and that pretty much all white dragons are like this. So that means that it will bear a grudge. If the players wind up handing the dragon its ass, which is possible, and it gets away, it's probably going to bear a grudge and come back and deal with them later on. Primal really means that it's not going to get too fancy, okay? We're not dealing with a dragon that's going to be wearing spectacles. We're not dealing with a dragon who is going to engage in a lot of conversation. So I know for those people who love to have their monsters role play with the players' characters, this is not the type of dragon that does that sort of thing. If you really want to do that, go for it, but it's not really what a white dragon would do. Now, Cryovane lacks the cunning and tactics of most of the other dragon types. A lot of dragons use quite complicated tactics and very advanced tactics, so you're going to stick with the bread and butter that all dragons have, and a white dragon would do the following in terms of their battle tactics. That is, get in the air and fly, breathe on its victims, and then get out of reach when it's ready, and it's either frozen all of its enemies solid, or it's going to fly in if it doesn't have its dragon breath, and it's going to pick somebody up, fly up into the air, and drop them off the side of the mountain. Now I know that sounds terrible, because what's going to happen if they fall off the side of the mountain? They're probably going to take like 20d6 falling damage, and their character is dead. But that's what a dragon would do, okay? That's what this type of dragon would do. It's not really going to lay a trap for the player's characters necessarily, although it could. It's usually going to be using those sorts of tactics. Some other dragons, dependent on the environment they live in and they're used to, will use, say, a dragon that breathes water will dive underneath the water, come out, breathe on its victim, and then drop back down into the water to provide itself with total cover so that nobody can target it. Or if you're dealing with a fire dragon, it would use lava. It would, it can go into the lava. The environment itself is dangerous. You can present some nasty things in terms of the cold in the Icespire hold if you wanted to. If you want to have constitution checks, that's fine. You could do something like that. I want to make it clear, and often I get this question, is what about Lair actions? What about legendary actions? It's a young white dragon. It doesn't have legendary actions, and it won't have Lair actions because it hasn't been there long enough, and it's not really the right type of dragon. It's too young, and as I said, it hasn't been around long enough. Okay, so what is the general approach when dealing with food? This is what your dragon normally does. It freezes its victim or its food or the animal before it eats it. Often what they'll also do is they will find its victim, bring it back to its larder. It might be something that's already been killed by somebody else. It will freeze it solid and leave it, keeping the meat fresh, and then when it's ready to eat it, it then consumes it later on. So those are the sorts of things you're likely to see, and it would be good to include sort of like a larder area in your adventure where you can see a lot of frozen animals that Cryovane has sort of stashed away for later nibbles. For those of you who like to sort of scare your players a little bit. Why not? Let's do that. Sounds like a lot of fun to me. Cryovane is currently sleeping on the rooftop of the main fortress, giving him a pretty good view of everything, which means sneaking up on the dragon should be quite difficult. The other thing, and the adventure actually talks about this a little bit more, but I will go into that. You've got to remember that dragons have really good senses, and their hearing is pretty good as well, so don't forget that sort of thing. Okay, I would not be utilizing necessarily a dice roll. I would be tending to use the passive perception of Cryovane rather than making an active dice roll. The problem with an active dice roll is a lot of people get stuck on but what if I roll a 1 and then I add the modifier for that? I wind up with a really low score, and I don't really want my dragon to be easily snuck up on. And I totally understand that. Makes perfect sense. But Jeremy Crawford has recently made it pretty clear that the operation of passive perception in active checks works more like this for those of you who are interested. And that is, with regard to sleeping, you would have something like disadvantage. So certainly, by all means, add and apply disadvantage. If you're dealing with a creature that decides, or whether it be the monster or it be another player, deciding to make an active check, they make their dice roll and they add their modifier, and if that is greater than or equal to the passive perception for that character, that's the number you use, rather than the lowest number. So the idea is that passive perception is the lowest you can get. Now, I've done videos on how to deal with passive perception before and advanced passive perception, so by all means go and check those out if you're not familiar with that sort of topic, and it should help you out quite a lot. Cryovane has not had time to collect a treasure hoard to lie on, and it's really obvious from the location description. There's nothing for them to collect. Normally a white dragon, when it has a treasure, will stick it in the ice and freeze over the top of it so that it can't be removed easily. You'd have to sort of get a pick and hammer and smash your way through it to get at it, which you can't really do because there isn't anything to actually find. But the location itself, the Icespire hold, has rooms within it that have coins and other types of treasures that the players can find. But why has Cryovane not collected them up just yet? I think the going idea behind it is, one, to give the players an opportunity to find some stuff before they deal with the dragon, but also the opportunity to have Cryovane find those items. So if you are the dungeon master and you feel like the players have taken a long time and Cryovane should have had time to actually remove those items and move them into his main sleeping area and then freeze over the top of it and keep all that loot in one place, then do that. That's what you can do. You're the dungeon master. You make the final call on those sorts of things. The adventure does talk about Cryovane being easily awoken by noise. There's actually 3 criteria. I'm not going to go over them, but it's pretty clear to me that Cryovane it might be resting and sleeping, but it's not deep sleep. So again, you could apply disadvantage to something like your passive perception, or you could say, look, it's sleeping, but it's still relatively aware of its location and what's going on. And it's already spelled out and says, you make too much noise, the dragon's going to hear you. And you don't need to roll dice to determine those sorts of things. In fact, it might actually be less fun to do so rather than, rolling dice and letting the dice determine everything. You don't have to have the dice determine absolutely everything about your adventure. You make those choices. Cryovane, like other white dragons, is very hard to bribe. Now, I know there'll be a few players who'll be saying, well, if this dragon doesn't have a treasure hoard, I could offer to give it some treasure, and then that buys me some time so we can get into position so that we can either escape or we can attack it and kill the thing. Here's the problem with a white dragon. By trying to bribe or give them something that's got any kind of worth, you have just insulted that dragon, and you would have insulted Cryovane by doing so. You have just suggested that this white dragon is weak and puny and incapable of collecting its own treasure. This is one of the greatest insults you can do. So bribing Cryovane is not an option for those of you who have players who are thinking, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll do what I've done with lots of other dragons. I'm going to offer them some treasure, and that will solve my problem. No, what will happen is Cryovane will kill them, and then when they're dead, it'll take the treasure off their body. That's how I would play it anyway. I'm hoping this information was useful to you, and if it was, fantastic. I have quite a few videos now sort of developing for Dragon of Icespire Peak. I also have a huge series on the Lost Mine of Phandelver for Dungeon Masters who are interested. If you're not a Dungeon Master or player, then I have a whole bunch of videos about Dungeons & Dragons 5e that you're welcome to go and check out, covering every aspect of the game if you want to see them. If you want to support the channel so I keep doing video content like this, you can find that I have a Patreon page where you get access to live streams and other content and my notes. I have an affiliate link to the book depository on Amazon where you can buy stuff online and I get a small commission. You pay exactly the same price. I also have a merchandise shelf where you can purchase stuff if you want to. Otherwise, just watch my videos. I get AdSense revenue from that, which is good enough for me as well. Make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. Hey, I know there's the normal stuff you always say, right? And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.